If you've been applying for jobs and haven't landed one yet, today you're in luck. I'll be sitting down with human resource professionals to get tips on how you can improve your chances of landing the jobs you're applying for. Keep watching. This is You and Your Money. You and Your Money is brought to you by Leno Corporate Services and The Paint Place. Welcome to You and Your Money, everyone. Joining us today to give job seekers tips on how to improve their chances of landing the jobs they're applying for are members of the executive board for the Bahamas Society for Human Resource Management. Lashanta Smith, President-elect, currently serves as Human Resources Director at the 𝗖𝗛𝗥𝗡𝗘𝗥, and Esaura Cumberbatch, President, is currently a talent consultant at 𝗪𝗓𝗓 Young. Collectively, they've worked in human resources for over 15 years. Esaura and Lashanta, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Esaura, what are some common mistakes job seekers make on their resume that cause them to be overlooked?
So one of the common things as HR professionals that we've seen is spelling and grammatical errors. And job seekers need to be mindful that your resume is your first impression before you actually get to land that interview. And so if you didn't take the time to proofread for spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, then obviously that recruiter is going to look at that resume and say, you know something, I'm going to put this one to the side and move along. And so if you don't want to be overlooked, make sure that you have someone, or maybe even source getting your resume professionally done, or a trusted advisor to review for any grammatical errors, so that at least you can make the first impression or the best impression the first time. The second thing is the layout. Job seekers sometimes tend to not be mindful of the layout of their resumes. When you're looking at work experience, for an example, you should always make sure that it's in chronological order. And what do I mean by that? It's just going from pretty much the most recent experience that you've had straight down to the last. And so those are some of the two common things that job seekers make in terms of mistakes.
Lashanta, is there anything else that you would want to add to that?
We go through thousands of resumes in a month, in a year, depending on which industry you're a part of. So you really want to have your resume stand out. So if you can avoid common templates, if you can, use some identifier that keeps your resume different, that may mean a specific layout that helps you to stand out, or some skills or civic organizations. Those leadership qualities and experiences help us to identify who are top flyers, and we really want to see a well-rounded individual on a resume, not just your experience or your education. So as much as you can balance the two and show us a little bit more about you in your resume, that helps.
Now, while we're thinking about or talking about the resume and how to put a resume together, how does one make their resume attractive when they've had such a large employment gap? Lashanta, you could start.
So after COVID, I think we've all experienced some gap of some sort. So either you were made redundant or you've had a life-changing experience. You had to take care of family members, or you've experienced some hardship during that time. So I think hiring managers are a little bit more relaxed with a break during the last 3 years. It just speaks to being honest. Make sure your resume speaks to being honest, and be able to answer that question when you're called in for the interview. If you can speak to us honestly, I think we're a little bit more lenient in that regard. We want to understand what you did during that time. Did you take classes? Did you just take a mental break? Those things are not frowned upon now. We've all experienced hardships in the last 3 years, so we just want you to be honest and upfront about it, straight up.
Now let's now talk about the interview. You found a candidate who looks great on paper. What does he or she need to do during the interview to move forward in the job selection process? Lashanta and then Esaura.
Well, I love a great personality. In the hospitality industry, that is the first thing our external and internal customers experience. So when you look great on paper, I'm looking for someone that is authentic, someone that is not a cookie cutter. You bring some sort of individuality and you have a little bit of pep. That's what we look for in the hospitality industry. And that does not mean that you have to be smiley and bubbly all the time, but that you are your true self and you can answer to everything that's on the resume because it's really you. That's what we're looking for in an interview.
𝗖𝗧𝗧?
And so, just to piggyback off again of what Lashanta said, it's not just in the hospitality, but also even the professional services industry. We're looking for persons that are energetic, that are enthusiastic, that are going to bring their authentic selves to work. So yes, you know, you may have your qualifications, your designations, but at the end of the day, it's your passion and your energy is what's going to help us drive building the business.
And this is where we put the aces in their places, right?
Exactly.
There's a big debate on whether or not job applicants should have to disclose their salary history. What are some perspectives you're hearing on this from your HR peers, and how would you suggest job applicants respond to an employer's request for their salary history if they don't want to disclose it? 𝗖𝗧𝗧?
So in our chapter, this is something that we always discuss. And pretty much we would say to persons, your salary information is sensitive and confidential to you, right? But I see it as a two-way, or I guess I can say collectively, we see it as a two-way. When we ask for employees to share their information, it's not necessarily because we want to lowball you, although some persons I've heard in the community say that's what it is. It's more so just to have an understanding of what is paid in the market across the various industries or in that specific industry. And then of course, on the candidate's end, you shouldn't have to share your information. And so if you have been asked that question and you're not comfortable, you can just simply say that you would rather not disclose that information at this time so that you can have a fair negotiation going forward.
Lashanta, what about you?
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to value. If there's a position, hiring managers and companies know exactly what they're willing to pay. They have an idea of a range, even if it's not finite, if it's not clear already. And when you present in the interview, if they're willing to offer you that role, it comes down to the value of the position in that organization and how you match up to that position. So if you are being asked about your past, I think you can, like 𝗖𝗧𝗧 said, opt out of sharing that information, but lean more into what you are interested in receiving because of the value that you bring to that position. So think about the value that you bring and position yourself in that way.
So in essence, you're saying that I should be okay with having to say, this is my ideal salary range.
This is what I'm thinking about, correct.
All right, good stuff.
And Ria, not to, but to also add to that, what we've also noticed too, what companies are doing, because they don't want to waste the candidate's time. That's the thing that we always hear, but I don't know what the salary range is because most jobs positions, they don't have the salary information and I don't want to waste time. Recruiters are actually asking persons when you go online, what's your desired salary range? So then of course, if it's not within that range, rather than having to waste that individual's time and to waste their time, you can kind of pretty much do a process elimination right there.
But I'm not sure whether or not it's a fair place to do a process of elimination because there still should be room for negotiation.
Agreed. And at the end of the day, as what Lashanta said, it's all about value at the end of the day and likability. So if you are a great candidate, you tick all the boxes that they're looking for, then at the end of the day, there should be a conversation.
All right. Well, 𝗖𝗧𝗧 and Lashanta, we have to take a quick break. We'll continue when we get back. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
But pain is pain, he says. It'll be fine, he says. You will do.
Hey, neighbor. What's good?
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today.
The paint place, when you want to paint it right the first time.
Now that's more like it.
Grand Bahama Business Outlook is back in person and better than ever. Join us on Thursday, March 16th at the Grand 𝗖𝗡𝗡𝗘𝗧 Resort for a full day of engaging presenters convening under the theme Forward, Upward, Onward, Together. keynote address by Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Chester Cooper. Moderators are Felicia Woods-Hanna and Dr. Kenneth Romer. Our presenters are the Honorable Ginger Moxie, Charnette Thompson, Deverson Warner, Mark Weller, Jeffrey Beckles, Dr. Linda Davis, Sonia Brown, and Keith Roy. There will also be panel discussions, one featuring Barry Malcolm, Ian Roll, James Carey, and Thomas Dean, and the other featuring Dennis DeVoe, Glynette Fowler, and Henry Smythe. Don't miss this valuable networking opportunity. Register today at tclevents.com or call 322-1000.
Welcome back to You and Your Money. Esaura Cumberbatch and Lashanta Smith, President and President-elect of the Bahamas Society for Human Resource Management, are with us today. Both HR professionals are here today to give job seekers tips on how to improve their chances of landing the jobs they're applying for. Now, I want to just go right in and ask the question, what are some ways job applicants can sell themselves when they don't have the required skills or experience for a particular role? Lashanta?
So this is something that we have in hospitality where persons may not necessarily have the degree or the experience that is required. You have other opportunities to share your value. So if you have civic organizations that you're a part of where you showed your leadership skills, where you were able to use some of those skills in that industry or in that organization, that is a great way to share. Talk about the strong points that you have, anything that is your strength that you can do really, really well, and then show us that you are pliable, you're teachable, you're coachable. That tells us that you can learn and that you're willing to learn, and that is much better than someone that is set in their ways. So if you are not necessarily experienced in the area, you want to make sure that you just show us that you've exhibited those skills somewhere else, and then show us that you are teachable and willing to learn.
Esaura, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so definitely I would add to the transferable skills. Like Shanta talked about, if you worked in civic organizations, but think about the common transferable skills or portable skills that can be used across any industry. When we think about communication, organization, leadership, as Lashanta would have mentioned, those are things that you could always tie great examples into across any industry.
Is it smart to dumb down your resume if you're overqualified for a position?
So life happens, and sometimes, you need to feed your families, you have bills to pay, and you may need to take a lesser role or something that's not necessarily anything that you would go for in the first instance. And so what we would say as HR professionals is honesty is the best policy. It's always better to sometimes omit certain things than to lie, and there's a difference. The difference with omitting is that this role may not call for all of these qualifications that you have, and so you're going to make sure that you tailor your resume to that role. But lying, of course, or embellishing is something that you definitely want to avoid, because then your integrity goes into question.
Now, during some interviews, job applicants are asked to describe their weaknesses. What's the best way to do this without hurting your chances of landing the job? Lashanta?
So starting up front, you want to make sure that you have a few weaknesses prepared before you get to the interview. You don't want to think about this on the fly. You need to identify what are some things that you're working on. So you reshape the way the question is asked. So if they ask you for weaknesses, you can say just a few things that I'm working on. And then as you list them, you talk about ways that you're working to improve them. So maybe you've had issues in the past with coming to work on time. And one way that you're working on this is you've implemented a new morning routine, which includes getting up an hour earlier. You have your alarm clock set, just showing us that you are working towards this and not knowing that you're late all the time and just letting it slide. So it's not a weakness, it's something that you're working on, and you have examples of how you're working on it.
What suggestions or recommendations can you give that actually speaks to what type of references should people be looking forward to give? Because sometimes, they may think about the character reference. What kind of reference do you actually look for?
I like to see references of persons that you've actually worked with in the past.
Okay.
So if one of those references can be a former employer or a manager, someone senior to you in that same organization, that would be great. You want to make sure that you use someone that knows that you're listing them as a reference, because we call these references and sometimes they're a little, unsure, and you call a name and you're asking for this reference and they say, who? So you want to put them on notice that they're being used as a reference. But a former employee or a manager of an organization that you've worked with in the past is usually a great place to start. Then you think about someone trusted in your community. So one of those civic organizations that you've been a part of, maybe an educational institution that you attended recently, and by recent I mean within the last 5 years, so that they can speak to you as a teachable person or coachable or a student. That can also be beneficial to you. And then if you think about someone you've worked with in the past in another capacity, maybe someone like a pastor, that is totally fine as well in your community to use as a reference.
We're now in the age of TikTok, where people of all ages are dancing and expressing their fun, creative side online. How much is a candidate's social media profile taking into account in the selection process, and what advice would you give to an active social media user who don't want to compromise their professional persona? Lashanta?
So I want to make you a little bit more comfortable. HR professionals do not have the full-time capacity to search every single candidate on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We don't. It again comes down to the nature of your job, right? So if you are a communications professional, if you will be active on social media, we want to make sure that you represent the company and that your image is clean. Obviously, we would search that kind of information. But we do understand that once 5 o'clock comes or you get off from your shift, you are a person, you are a human. So there is some leniency in terms of having your professional life versus your personal life. But we want you to be mindful of things. There are red flags that we look out for. So if we do come across someone that is, extremely derogatory, use of profanity, really things that go against the nature of the company and our ethos, those things are red flags for us. But we just make sure that within the company there is a strong social media policy that you can adhere to. For example, companies will ensure that you don't record on property, you're not doing so in your uniform, you're not speaking on behalf of the company without authorization ahead of time. So those things are used to protect you. And then your personal social media platforms, as a professional, you want to make sure that you are, making sure that you are not sharing sensitive information, that you are not, trashing any of the companies that you've worked for in the past, or any of the managers sharing any sensitive information, just to be sure that you are an ideal candidate when it comes to that offer and putting you and bringing you on the team.
So a lot of companies, they recruit from within. What are some things people should be mindful of when applying for another position that's available at their place of employment? Lashanta?
So if you are interested in an internal role, most companies post those positions internally, but you want to have a conversation. Don't just apply to the position. Maybe you want to go to the new hiring manager, the new department, and let them know of your interest. This is something that you keep confidential, obviously, because you do not need everyone to know that you're interested in this role. If you are being taken seriously or you're seriously being considered for the role, then you want to approach your existing manager. You want to let them know that you're interested in the new role and that you're having a conversation. Most companies have a transfer policy, but just to ensure that it is amicable and to make sure that you're above board and to continue that relationship that you have with the existing manager and potentially the new manager, you want to have an open dialogue with those two parties just to make sure that you bridge the gap there. And anyone else does not need to know that you're applying and that you're interested in this role.
So what about even having a conversation with an HR manager in the event that, you don't want to necessarily have that direct conversation with the hiring manager or your current manager?
Absolutely, why not? HR is that person, confidential, that you can speak to and express your interest first and foremost, saying, I want to move into another area, and maybe even getting feedback from that HR manager on what it is that they need to show and any developmental things that they can work on. That's also helpful as well.
All right, well, Esaura and Lashanta, we have to take another break. When we get back, we'll talk more about salaries. When is the right time to bring it up and how to negotiate, or even how to avoid taking a pay cut. You're watching You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
You watch them grow, and make plans for them even before they're old enough to talk. You spend a lifetime of sacrifice to pave the way for their success and create a tomorrow you too can be proud of. Can you tell who is the investor? At Leno, we believe everyone who has ever put a penny aside for a future dream is an investor. If you're new to investing, Leno's financial experts stand ready to design plans based on your goals. Let's sit down and explore the options one-on-one and see how, together, we can make your dreams come true. Whether considering traditional investments like a new home, car, your own business, security in retirement, or your child's college fund, we take the confusion out of the process and make an investor out of you. Call 396-3225 for an appointment. Leno, your bridge to the future.
But pain is pain, he says. It'll be fine, he says. You would do.
Hey neighbor, what's good?
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today.
The paint place when you want to paint it right the first time.
Now that's more like it.
Welcome back to You and Your Money. We're continuing our show on tips for improving your chances of landing the jobs you're applying for. Esaura Cumberbatch and Lashanta Smith from the Bahamas Society for Human Resource Management are still with us. What are some ways that job seekers can change careers or industries without taking a pay cut? Lashanta, I want you to start with that.
Start with the transferable skills. When you think about every job that you've ever had, there are skills that we all need to do our jobs. And I think Esaura mentioned this earlier, making sure that you highlight communication, leadership. Those skills, every single job will need and you will use. You want to make sure that you're reviewing the job description or the outline of the skills and duties of the job that you're applying for. You want to make sure that there's a good match and some synergies. If you can identify, a majority of those skills in your existing role or roles that you've had in the past, it may mean that you have to group some things together or go back a little further to prove that you've done it. You can achieve that, and switching jobs is not difficult if you identify those transferable skills and reaching back into civic organizations and other jobs that you've worked in the past and transferable skills to take with you.
Esaura, is there anything else?
The only thing that I would add to that too is just during this transition, you want to do an internal assessment of yourself. As Lashanta would have mentioned, you talked about the transferable skills, but you want to ensure that you're also being realistic and that you're setting realistic goals as well for where it is you hope to go or transition to.
All right, so when is the appropriate time to ask about salary and benefits? Esaura?
So this is a $1 million question that people always ask. When should I ask about salary? And typically the rule of thumb is that you follow the lead of the recruiter or the hiring manager. It's a little off-putting sometimes when candidates, you bring up salary right out the bat. How much are you guys paying? Or how much are y'all paying? Wait until the discussion is led in that direction, and then you can discuss salary.
Lashanta?
I agree with Esaura. You want to make sure this is a dance. You want to make sure that you're not stepping out of line, you're not going too far ahead because the interviewer is the lead, right? So you want to make sure that if it's the first interview and it's going really, really well, you'd probably be called back for a second interview if all of the parties are not in the room. Usually the second or third interview, they'll let you know that this is the final interview or these are the next steps. Those later interviews are probably best to have the salary conversation, and you want to let the interviewer lead that portion of it. If you get to the end of the interview and there's no question about salaries, you can ask a little bit about the benefits package of this role, but other than that, you want to just be careful, manage it very eloquently.
Now, Lashanta, how would you advise someone who wants to negotiate their salary, but they just don't want to risk losing the job offer?
Do not accept right away. Usually when you're offered a position, you're given time to think about it. And if you're not, that's a red flag. So you should not accept it under duress. Take some time. ask if you can get back to them within 24 hours. And in that time, really assess and evaluate what are the benefits that you need to make this job work. When you get back to the interviewer or the person that has offered you, you thank them for the offer that you've been given, but you ask a little bit about, I'm really accustomed to full-time insurance or 100% insurance, and then you kind of build on and add if it's possible. And that will tell you whether or not you can negotiate or if they're open to negotiation.
You mentioned the red flags from a hiring company perspective.
Right.
Can you touch on a little bit more red flags so that the job seekers can know what it is that they should be looking out for?
I'm sure 𝗖𝗓 is going to add to this list, but some of the red flags that I would identify is the recruitment experience. When you're called in, is it giving you enough time to prepare to come in for the interview? Once you arrive to the interview, when you sit down and observe the workplace, are people rushed? Are they stressed? Is anyone crying on their way out of the door? During the interview process, do they take time with you, or do you feel, again, rushed? Do they really care about the role? And can they explain and answer those questions for you? And then are they organized? Do they fit the needs of your personal needs? Because it's not just about us filling a role, it's also about you feeling comfortable in the role that we'd like for you to fill. So you want to look out for everything in the interview process just to make sure that it is spot on for you.
And just to add to what Lashanta would have said, you want to pay attention to those red flags. Say, for example, just as much as you're the individual looking for the job, just as much as we are looking to see if you're a good fit, the candidate as well is looking, do I want to in fact come into this environment? What's the culture like, as Lashanta would have mentioned? What was my experience like? Did they allow me to ask questions, or did I feel rushed? Some of the other red flags is that, of course, she mentioned signing an offer letter, or if it seems like, look, we're eager to get you in right away. That's a huge red flag, and granted, some persons may, but I really want this job. Pull it back a bit, have some patience, and let the process take care of itself. And what I mean by that is when you notice that a recruiter interviews you for a position, you're called in last minute, and then they want you to come to work on Monday. That's something that you want to say, why is this such a rush? And then you may also too want to ask about, what happened to the person that was in this role who succeeded you.
All right. Well, 𝗖𝗓, I want us to go into some of the job resources. Where can people find job opportunities? Are there any new channels or platforms job seekers can actually or should be aware of?
So yes, there are. There are actually two key ones that I would like to mention at this time. The first one is, of course, the Bahamas Department of Labor Jobseekers website. They have a comprehensive listing of job vacancies and opportunities that are available in the Bahamas. And also, not even to add to that, it's a one-stop shop, I like to say. So they help you with your resumes, preparing for the interview, and actually even outfitting you in clothing if you need it. So they have what is also called the labor's closet, where you're given 2 pieces of clothing based on the inventory to prepare for your interview. So it's no reason why you should not land the job that you're looking for. And then the other channel is Bahamas 242 Jobs. Mr. Donovan Powell has a great system that has another listing of jobs as well across various industries, and also too for the employer and employee as well, using artificial intelligence platforms.
All right. Well, 𝗖𝗓 and Lashanta, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so
Rhea.
much for having us.
Yes.
That's it for today's show. To learn more about the Bahamas Society for Human Resource Management, visit shrmbahamas.org. Don't forget to follow You and Your Money on Facebook and tune in next week for a brand new episode. I'm Ria Christina. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.